Hello, and you're very welcome back to the Public Eye Podcast, a 6-part series of podcasts brought to you by Granite Exchange. I'm your host, Sarah Travers, and throughout the series, I'll be speaking with local entrepreneurs and business owners to learn more about how these companies have come to be. We'll be gaining insight into their growth and how they continue to innovate. So wherever you get your podcasts from, remember to keep an eye out for new episodes over the next 6 weeks and subscribe to stay up to date. Today I'm joined by Gervase McGenity, Director of Business Law at Granite Legal Services. Gervase, you are very welcome to the podcast. Now, before we begin, I'm just going to give people a little bit of background on Granite Legal. Granite Legal is a niche commercial law practice offering a range of legal advice for individuals and businesses, from advice on employment law to the management of all an enterprise's legal requirements. Clients can access a full, professional and tailored package which will service their specific business needs. Their team is focused on providing sound, practical advice to clients in both the private and public sectors and across a wide range of industries. They've significant experience in working with all types of businesses and organisations, from startups to established businesses, seeking opportunities to grow and expand. So Gervase, it sounds like you're kept very busy anyway. You can tell us, first of all, if you will, how the opportunity came around for you to join the company.
Good morning, Sarah. It came at a perfect time in my life, really. I had started off with a law degree in Queen's, and within that I had taken a year out to study in the US. And when I finished my law degree, I wasn't sure if I was going to go into practice. It can be very difficult in Northern Ireland. The number of places to allow students to qualify as a solicitor or barrister are fairly limited, and I tried the entrance examination twice, didn't get it, and decided then I'd move to England. So I spent the formative years of my legal career in England, and in private practice I qualified as a solicitor over there, acting initially for a trade union practice. I effectively switched sides, for want of a better term, from acting for claimants to acting for the employers. And at that point my practice areas developed in that whilst initially I was a pure employment lawyer, I took on lots more commercial and corporate work. So I trundled along in that sort of role until 2009. And then the opportunity arose to return to Northern Ireland. I was approached by Norbrook Laboratories, and I became their company solicitor. I was there from 2009 until 2017. And combination of both personal and professional reasons led me to leave Norbrook and to undertake consultancy work. Sadly, at the time, my partner's father was quite ill in Manchester, and she wanted the time to travel backwards and forwards to look after him. And that meant I became self-employed, so I could both work and manage the kids whilst Janice was undertaking something that was very, very important to her. Sadly, Janice's dad passed away in December, 2nd of December 2018. At that stage, we decided that we were going to revert to our more traditional roles. In the new year, I started to ramp up the consultancy work I was doing, and I had an opportunity to undertake a fixed-term contract in Dublin. I didn't particularly relish the travelling up and down to Dublin, and it would have been a requirement that I did. I had conversations with another local entrepreneur here, and he was keen to have established in Uri a commercially focused legal practice, and I very much liked that idea. I thought that Newry is a good town. It's ideally located between Dublin and Belfast, and I genuinely felt there wasn't a practice in the city that offered a viable alternative to the commercial practices in either Dublin or Belfast. And I thought there was an opportunity there.
Absolutely. And I'm sure you've no regrets either, because you're now based right here in this very building where we're broadcasting from, the wonderful Granite Exchange. Obviously, a lot has happened during 2020. Very challenging times to be running a business, but you definitely have no regrets.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. The type of work I do is, there are many established businesses in Newry. There are lots of entrepreneurs. There is plenty of work in the area. The local businesses traditionally would have went to Belfast or Dublin. I want to try and encourage them to stay and to seek service offerings in the Newry area. I think the difficult time that we have had, everybody, business and personal alike, as a consequence of COVID, has meant everybody has looked through how they do things with a different lens. And this time last year, I would never have undertaken a Zoom meeting.
No, I hadn't heard of Zoom this time last year.
No, absolutely. Presenteeism was a reality, where people were expected to be at work in order to do their work. And I think what the last 12 months have shown us is that it's not necessary. That once you have the right people who are engaged in their job, provided you have the appropriate technologies and give the appropriate support, then the new way of working is 100% viable. And it actually helps people, I think, have a work-life balance. I have friends who would work in Dublin and they are ecstatic that they no longer have to spend upwards of 3 hours a day travelling. And that's time they either get to spend dealing with work tasks, or indeed time they get to spend with their family. And that's what a work-life balance is about. And I think...
Yeah, and we'll probably see more people staying in employment. I'm thinking of people maybe with young children or with caring responsibilities for whom the old way just didn't allow any flexibility.
Correct. I agree. The reality is the employment laws we have always allowed for the concept of flexible working. But, and I use this as a particular example, the right to request flexible working existed, but there was never an obligation on an employer to give or to grant that request. And what you see now is that flexible working has become a necessity for the employer's business to survive. And I think employees are the beneficiaries to that.
Now, in terms of Granite Exchange as well, because you do have, a suite of offices here available. Again, there's flexibility there. If you need to meet people, or if you need to do something that's a bit more official, you could work here, but you can also work from home, and that suits you. Are you living close by as well?
I live close by. I live in a little place called Drummond. It's about 7 miles outside Newry. Personally, I like to get into the office. I like to have that, I suppose, separation of work time and home time. I have a home office. I have worked in that home office for a couple of years. I base myself from it. But that's just a personal preference for me. One of the reasons that we chose Granite Exchange as a base for the new practice is because of the transient population. So, as you said, the guys here, they rent out office space to various businesses. So people can come for a day, for a week, for 2 weeks. I have met so many different people just by having a coffee, having a chat when they come in, And from that, I have built up a couple of business connections. So not only is there an office building here that is technically as advanced as anywhere I've worked, it's brand spanking new. The quality of the premises are fantastic. And to me, I suppose I'm a bit of a traditionalist in a sense. I think that creates a good first impression to clients when you're meeting clients. But because of the sort of nature of the building, I'm actually getting to meet people that can potentially become clients and that you can build up a business relationship with.
It is very hard in the current climate to network, so you're getting the networking opportunity.
Absolutely, I am.
So moving on to the type of work that you do, Gervase, what sort of cases are you dealing with at the minute on a daily basis?
A very broad range, Sarah. As I said before, I started off life as a pure employment lawyer, and I did that for probably 5-6 years. But my most recent in-house experience was as general counsel for a global pharmaceutical company, and the reality in that role is that anything that has a faint whiff of being legal will cross your desk. And unless you deal with it, you then become the person who is seen as the blockage in whatever the issue is. So my practice area is wide in terms of I would deal with employment law, corporate, commercial, regulatory compliance, dispute, risk. Risk would be a very big one in terms of an in-house function where you analyse what risks exist to the business, and that's part of the sort of a proactive approach to providing internal legal services within a business. So although I'm in private practice, I am doing broadly the same work, albeit for a variety of different clients. So whereas Norbrook would have been my sole client, I have many different clients, each of whom needs a particular aspect of the work that I do.
So you can have clients coming to you with an emergency or a crisis or a legal matter, or you would have clients that maybe have you on a retainer so that you're looking out and looking ahead. Is that something then that you would recommend?
Absolutely. So we took a view that traditional legal services tend to be reactive. So the client doesn't tend to go to the lawyer until the problem has arisen. And sadly, very often that is too late. So
can that be more costly in the long run?
It can, absolutely it can. One of our service offerings is effectively an outsourced in-house counsel. So we want to try and encourage businesses, business owners, and indeed our clients to think proactively. So to undertake a sort of like a legal review and audit of their business to understand where problems might arise, understand where there are gaps, and understand what they need to plug that gap. On a very simple basis, and again from experience, I've acted for quite a few entrepreneurial individuals. Their desire is to create a business and to which will make a profit. So they're focused on that end game, and they're very good at building the business. They have a strong idea. They have a strong work ethic. They build the business to the extent where it is turning a profit. But very often the ancillary issues as they see them, the fluffiness, the things like the contracts of employment, the policies and the procedures, etc., things that they don't view as integral to the business fall by the wayside.
Is it that they see that as fluffy, or is it just because, in the early stages you're building your business and the money isn't really coming in at that stage and it's about cutting costs?
I don't think it's necessarily about cutting costs. It's about focus. And the reality is, any individual, no matter how good they are or how bright they are, they cannot spread themselves across every area that a business needs to deal with. Initially, that's what happens because it's one person or two people, an idea, a vision, a strategy. They start to get a bit of money in, they reinvest it back into the business. But business owners need to take a very early, proactive approach to assessing the risk.
So what would you say are the three most important things for a business to have in place when they're starting out?
Well, a plan, most definitely. Well, a plan in no particular order. Certainly the finance. They need to have enough financial clout to give themselves sufficient breathing space for the business to become established. Linked to that is a plan. And that's where it's trying to persuade businesses to take a structured approach. They understand where they want to get to, but unless you have a plan of how you're going to get there, you could end up all over the place, in very simple terms. And then, rather selfishly, I'm going to suggest that the next important thing is to take appropriate counsel at an early stage. Because even though you have a plan, even though you have the money to support you to try and make that plan a reality, unless you seek appropriate professional advice at an early stage, then mistakes can be made which can prove very costly to the business in the long run.
Give me an example of the kind of mistakes that you see.
Going back to contracts of employment as an example, I've seen instances where significant faith was put into a key individual in a business. They weren't an owner in the business, they weren't a shareholder, but they were effectively a key man in that business. The contract was not appropriately drafted, and there wasn't sufficient protection on things like intellectual property, and this is a business where intellectual property would be very relevant. And unfortunately there was a falling out between the key individual and the business owner, and let's just say there were difficulties with where the intellectual property went at that point. And that had a detrimental impact on the business in terms of its ability to market its product at the time that it needed to.
So contract law is key here, and really protecting yourself.
It's key for any business to protect itself. Business and personal life, in my view, they run on fairly similar, planes. In a personal life, you want to make decisions to ensure that your family's protected, that nobody's taking advantage of you, that you're fair, that you're reasonable. So those same considerations pull into the business world, and all a contract is doing is setting out the rules of engagement. This is the structure. These are the rules by which we're both going to play. These are reasonable because they're in compliance with the law. And where things go wrong, we can both go back and look at the rules.
So you kind of have your foot in both camps. You're starting out a new business yourself, and you're looking for people to come to you. But why would someone choose you rather than a non-specialist firm they've used for perhaps years? Because in Northern Ireland, we tend to stick to what we know.
Yes, and that is the reality. So I suppose there are two different elements to this. The first is I want the local sort of Greater Newry area businesses to recognise that there is a city standard practice that can provide the services that business needs, that is local here in the city. That we have an office here. I think that we are the first practice of this kind in the city of Newry. As a firm, we don't offer any criminal services. We don't do conveyancing. we don't do matrimonial, we don't do personal injury. Everything that we offer is in somehow linked to what a business will experience at some point in its life. So that's one thing. We want to try. Newry's a city in its own right. It's growing up now. We have the ability and we have the people, and in the concept of shop local, we want to try and encourage the successful Newry businesses to shop local. The second thing, so that's one element. The second element is, and it's a point you made, and it's quite right. Very often people don't like change. So having to persuade or encourage people to leave something that they are familiar with to engage with something that's new can be difficult. And this is linked to the point I made about the service offerings we don't provide. We're not asking people to come to us to be their one-stop shop for everything. And particularly in a city like Newry, people have developed long-standing relations with a solicitor who has more than likely been a family solicitor for many years. My own personal experience and in terms of my own ability or lack of ability is I recognise I can't do everything. And on a very simple level, I can't see how any other solicitor can suggest to a client that they can do everything. Because you simply cannot be in the magistrate's court on a Tuesday morning, having prepped for whatever you had to prep for that, and then switch to perhaps draft 70-page articles of association that need to be bespoke for a particular client. It's very difficult to chop and change between many different areas of law.
Yeah, so you know what you know and you do it well.
Yes.
I suppose also people like to know the person that they're doing business with, and that's very true in Northern Ireland. So, if people were thinking of finding out a little more about who Gervase the man is, you're also a father and a partner, and I wonder, are you as good at winning cases in the house as you are in the office?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. No. Look, I've got my partner Janice. I met in Manchester when I was living over there. I went to England with the intention of staying for 3 years. 1 year university, 2 years training contract, and I ended staying about 11 and a half years, come home with partner and 1-year-old child. So,
and how does Janice find living here?
She loves it. She absolutely loves it. So Janice was born in the city of Manchester, but we live, I think as I said, in Drummondtee, which is a little rural community about 7 miles from where we are now. We live out in the countryside. Our closest neighbours are fields of cows.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
But very different to metropolitan suburbia.
It is.
Yeah. Tell us about your daughters then. So you talked about having one child, but you now have two.
Two, yeah. So Niamh is 12. She's just started secondary school this year. Great experience for her, albeit a different experience than what it should have been with the new normal, as they say. And then my younger daughter, Kiva, she turned 10 on the 9th of November. So they're both really good kids. I couldn't ask for better kids, to be honest. They're good fun. They're engaging, they're musical.
I'm sure they have you wrapped around their little finger. Are they looking likely to follow in the same career path then?
No. Sadly, no, or fortunately, no, whichever way you want to look at it. Niamh wants to be a vet. That's her primary, I suppose, professional goal. She is quite a talented dancer, ballet dancer. She has danced with English Youth Ballet, and she attends monthly courses with the ballet boost. Their professional teachers come over from London
Wow.
once a month, and she dances up at the Mac with it. So I think her mother, Janice, would love that to perhaps morph into a career. I'm not so sure. I'm rather more attracted to the proposition of her being a vet, particularly given the rural environment we live in. And Kiva wants to be a teacher during the school year, but also wants to run a little bistro cafe type thing.
Perfect. So an entrepreneur
Yes, an entrepreneur.
who also will look after other people's children. She sounds perfect, and I believe she's a great cook.
She loves food, and I'm a self-confessed foodie. Listeners can't see, but if this was a television program, it would be blatantly obvious that I love food.
Nonsense.
Christmas has been a prime example of that.
What's your favourite?
Favorite dinner, or
What do you like to cook?
I love to cook Indian food. I had lots of Indian friends in England, and they taught me how to cook all the various curries from scratch, and I really enjoy that.
So, winding to a close now, Gervase, what advice would you give to students who have just graduated in law? I mean, what a difficult time to be a graduate and are beginning to start their career in a very different world.
Very much so. So the advice is, there's such a range of advice and so many topics that you could chat to somebody at that stage about. It depends whether they have been able to gain a place at the institute. It depends whether they're about to start what's called a training contract in a practice. If I talk to somebody who's just finished a law degree and leaving university, so a law degree is very easily carried. People, the 3 years that you spend at university, you can change. You don't ever feel that you have to move into practice in law. There are lots of roles in the business environment that include an element of legal thinking. And legal thinking, in my view, is boils down to the ability to take a lot of facts, distill them down to what the core issues are, and to then research, understand where to go to research. I go and review the law, go and review precedent, case law, whatever it is, to understand the application of those facts to the law, or vice versa, to then reach a decision on what you're going to do. And you see it all the time in like a compliance role in industry. So students that have a law degree, first thing I'd be saying is that don't feel you have to move into practice. There are other jobs that you can do. If they are focused in moving into practice, then I think it would be important for them to get some work experience, to get an idea of what an office environment is like, and to understand it if that's going to be for them, firstly. And secondly, what area do they want to practice in? Do they want to work for, like us, a city practice that have, I suppose, certain specialisms? Or do they want to work in like a high street practice?
But those skills could take them anywhere, and that logical brain and that applying logic to problem solving really is what the world needs right now.
Yes, I think so.
Now, finally, the purpose of this podcast is to inspire existing business owners and those ambitious entrepreneurs out there to give them the best advice going forward. It is a climate like we've never seen before. What would you say to anyone listening to this now?
I would say to use the difficult times that we've had to look inwardly at your business, to understand what it is you need to do to make yourself stronger, what you need to do to change your way of working, to make yourself stronger, to reduce risk. I think this is a classic example. The COVID pandemic, the initial shutdown in March, came out of the blue. Many businesses were totally unprepared for that. Many businesses won't recover from that. And part of that is in my view, because they weren't stable enough in the first place. So instead of taking a reactive approach, take a proactive approach. It's going to involve some time and effort, and I fully accept that, on top of the day-to-day survival that many businesses are experiencing in the current climate. But I think this is a time that it's make or break. If you need to put a little bit of extra effort in now to undertake an audit of your entire business, to understand where the pinch points are, to understand where there are gaps, and take the immediate steps now to plug those gaps, I think it could mean, it could be the difference between survival and failure.
Absolutely.
And I think keeping that mindset throughout the remainder of your business life, to constantly review, to ensure you remain compliant, to ensure that you keep up to date with developments, because as we all know, things change regularly. You want to not feel you're in a position of comfort. You want to make yourself ready to deal with any changes or things that you do not have control over that come your way.
Yes, who knows what's ahead for the rest of 2021, but I suppose if there is a positive, people have come through, they have pivoted, they have shown that they're resilient, and they have shown that when an economic shock like what we have seen hits, it is all about being able to adapt and move forward. Gervase, it's been a pleasure talking to you today. Thank you for joining me here on the Public Eye podcast. Good luck with your business. And remember, for those of you listening today, wherever you get your podcasts from, keep an eye out for all our new episodes over the next 6 weeks and subscribe to stay up to date. This podcast was recorded in Granite Podcast Studio. Interested in starting up your own podcast but don't know how? Granite Podcast Studio can help. Record your podcast in our state-of-the-art studio, which is based in the heart of Newry City. Our studio has cutting-edge and user-friendly technology and can seat up to 4 people. We also provide an editing service for our team, using your guidance and editing notes to provide you with a flawless finished product, leaving your listeners wanting more. For more information on how you can get started, visit www.granitepodcaststudio.com.